All right, so now we're in the bonus episode or extra innings or what was the term for in wrestling when you had to
Extra
go to
time. It was
extra
the
time?
soccer extra time. Yeah.
Extra time, the soccer. Okay, so now we're in our extra time, only because overtime is taken up by someone else. But the question for this show, for the post show, is going to be: let's say that Apple. So, well, let me explain this because it's so hard to imagine the future that we have now, right? The present that we're in now without Apple, right? They really changed the entire tech industry, right? They invented the iPhone. And after the iPhone, that changed so many things, right? It's changed the way phones looked in general, right? You look at the way anyone is listening, go and Google before and after iPhone and look at the way phones looked before the iPhone and then the way phones looked after the iPhone. The App Store, right? We didn't know there were going to be things like apps that just change our lives, you know? Remember the whole, there's an app for that campaign that Apple used. So Apple's really have can be credited with the creation of so many companies that we know and we use today, right? I can name several companies that wouldn't be in existence had it wouldn't be been for Steve Jobs standing on that stage and pulling that iPhone out of his pocket, right? So it's hard to say an alternative future, you know, without Apple. So let's just say, for example, they did create the phone, right? They started the tech industry down this path that it followed, right? We had the iPhone, we have the iPad, and all of that, but somewhere along the line, Apple failed to keep innovating, right? They got stagnant and they failed to keep capturing the hearts and mind of all of these tech geeks and other companies started excelling and taking a lead and kind of overshadowed Apple, right? So we have iOS, but we would look at iOS as you know I'm trying to think of one of the smaller uh, phone operating systems that just didn't make it.
Palm.
Yes,
Palm.
yes, like the Palm. Yeah, we look at Apple, we look at iOS as just another Palm. Like they're credited with innovating so much stuff, but now we're using something else that's the dominant force in technology. So just kind of get a mindset like that, right? Apple existed. We're down the same path. We love having our tablets, our phones, our smart devices, but they're not Apple. Who would be those leaders and who would we be using or who could we see ourselves using? So I'll go first since this is my weird hypothetical. Um, I can remember a couple of things that we tested back when we were testing devices and stuff at Stewart. And one of the main things, one of the ones that really stood out to me that I absolutely loved at the time, and I was really rooting for it, was those Windows phones. You remember those? We got a set
Mm-hmm.
of those, and they had that tile, right? Which version of Windows came out? Was it Windows? Um, uh, I can't remember the name of the Windows. That's how long I've been outside of the Windows ecosystem. But it had that tile display, right? It's the same one that they had on the desktop, and it's basically you take those tiles and add them to the phone, so the calendar and stuff like that. It looked like a Windows desktop operating system on the phone. The problem was it didn't function anywhere near as good as it did on the desktop, and definitely it didn't function nowhere near as good as iOS did, which is part of the problem and brought along the demise of Windows Phone. That and a lot of business decisions too behind the scenes, because I've actually seen a couple of like not documentaries but like stories that kind of dive in depth of what happened, right? Because Microsoft, even though Apple had took so much of a huge lead into mobile, Microsoft was still a dominant player in the tech industry anyway, right? So them doing anything, whether it was a watch or the Zune or whatever, following behind Apple, they still had a built-in user base already, right? So, you know, you would think a startup company for them to sell 1 million devices would be a huge win for a startup. Whereas a company like Microsoft, they introduce a new device. If they don't sell 10 million of them, then it's a fail for them. You get what I'm saying? It was that
Yeah.
kind of dynamic. So
If we
Windows
can't
Phone,
if we can't immediately dominate the market, it's a failure.
Right, right. If we can't get a huge market share over Apple and Samsung, then we may as well not do it. You
Right.
know, and that I think that's what the main wall that Windows Phone ran into. But I was excited about it. You remember it? I remember
Yeah.
it had an awesome camera on it. I have some of our cruise photos in our cruise frame in there, and I recognize them because I took them with that Windows Phone that was on loaner to us. And man, that camera was advanced. It was an awesome
Yeah.
phone.
I have on my list. So I had. It was tough to stay on top of because it's Windows, right? And there was just so much
Yeah,
to it.
yeah,
But like you would have to do all the Windows admin stuff that you have to do on Windows on your computer, and none of that
right,
was built to be done um, on that small of a screen,
right,
right? And so
right.
because basically they just put Windows on the um, on that
Yeah,
mobile
on the
device.
device.
So I had the Windows Phone, right? And I had one with a slide out keyboard. It was one of my favorite factors. And it had a little itty bitty stylus that you could pop out
Right,
too. And it
right.
was just phenomenal. But then I found myself just trying to do way, way, way too much
Yeah,
with it. And I think I was paying for it on my own because the company only wanted to pay for certain things. So I loved that phone. One thing it does make me wish that we had, that hopefully Apple's going to address next year, that there's some rumors about, is I do wish we had more form factors. Everything is just a rounded rectangle, and there's just not a lot of innovation as far as form factor
yeah.
goes until we get into some of this folding stuff. So,
Right, right. And even with the fold, it's still gonna unfold and still look, basically
yeah,
like an iPhone, a bigger iPhone, or two iPhones side by side, or whatever they come up with. But
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So Windows Phone, that was one I was really pushing for. But like you said, one of the things that hurt it was it just didn't function. It wasn't configurable. It wasn't user friendly to like. It wasn't as intuitive as iOS or even Android was at the time.
right.
Uh, a big roadblock that we ran into, if you remember, um, it couldn't go into the device manager. Well, it was in the device manager, but it was only basic things, right? You could see the
Yeah,
device on the manager, and you can know if it was in compliance or not, if it had the email address. Other than that, you couldn't push out apps. You couldn't push out configuration files. You couldn't wipe and block or blacklist devices and stuff like that. It just didn't give you the control, but it was a Windows phone. It was
yeah,
Windows. Like, why can't I do this on a Windows phone? And yeah, so they really rushed it to market and kind of shot themselves in the foot. And before you know it, when things are moving so fast and furious like they were back then, if you didn't give people what they wanted right away, then you just got moved. The crowd moved on and you got overlooked. So
yeah,
um, another thing that we mentioned earlier was the Windows suite of things, and mainly that was OneDrive, and it was one I use. I still have tons of files and stuff stored on there, all of that. But OneDrive was my go-to for my cloud storage. Right? I know the company gave us, it was Box. They gave us subscriptions to Box, or enterprise subscription to Box. There was still Google Drive and stuff like that. And iCloud at the time was just um, contacts, pictures, calendar events. You know what I mean? It wasn't any file storage and stuff like that. iCloud uh, really evolved to what it is now. But initially starting off, it was really just contacts, calendars, phone backup. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. And OneDrive was my go-to for cloud storage. Now I know a lot of this, and again, I keep trying to explain this whole hypothetical scenario. A lot of these companies wouldn't offer these features unless Apple pushed them to do so. You know what I mean? Even if Apple
right.
didn't create it, Apple forced the hands of Microsoft to be able to allow, um, Word, Excel, not Keynote, PowerPoint and stuff on certain screen sizes for free, right? What is it? Like anything below 13 inches is free,
Yeah,
or 12 inches or something. Apple forced the hand of these companies to be able to do that. But, let's say these companies went down that natural path, I can see myself fully in the Apple suite. I mean, the Apple suite, the the Microsoft suite of things, right? The what do they call the service now? Office.
Office
Office
365.
360. Yep. Office 365. Yep. I can see myself using that and the services and stuff that come with that. So, um, of course, we can't talk about mobile phones without talking about BlackBerry, right?
Yeah.
And they were such a dominant player for so long. And even if you weren't, up on the BlackBerry Enterprise server and stuff like that, having to configure devices and manage devices through that, they eventually got to a point where they were allowing people to set up their Gmail and their I remember having my Yahoo email address set up on one of the Blackberries and stuff like that. Text messaging and stuff was always awesome on it. But if we're talking about apps, they still had an app store before Apple's app store, right? And we were only talking about 5 or 6 apps that they offer. No Facebook, no social networking apps and stuff. But let's say they evolved to the point where they were offering mobile games and stuff on that. I can really see BlackBerry as the leader, and not the Google Play Store or the App Store, right? I can see
Yeah.
BlackBerry still maintaining that dominance in this alternative future. So I would say we would just be on some very cool, very advanced Blackberries. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I see. I think BlackBerry. I liken them to Blockbuster Video
Yeah,
that
yeah,
could have dominated
yeah,
and continued to dominate if they had moved with the times, right? I mean, Netflix just killed Blockbuster, but Blockbuster could have done the same thing that Netflix did,
yeah,
move to um, renting DVDs, shipping DVDs via mail and stuff like that, right? And then eventually get into the streaming market. They could have done all of those things, right? But they
yeah,
just didn't. They just didn't keep up with the market. So
yeah,
BlackBerry had that same challenge. Nobody's going to want to type on a piece of glass. They're going to want physical keyboards. And there
yeah,
are times when I miss those little chiclet keys. But
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And then they got to the point where it was just so much confusion going on. Remember, they had phones that were half screen and half keyboard, right?
yeah,
The top part was touch screen. You got your capacitive touch screen, and you still had your keyboard. Then that keyboard got smaller and smaller, and they offered more screen. So it was 2/3 screen and 1/3 keyboard, and then they put the keyboard in the back where you would slide out the keyboard and stuff like that. So they went through a really confusing period. You remember that tablet that they had?
I don't.
So they
But
had a tablet that was awesome. The problem was at that point in time, only tech nerds understood the technology they put on, sort of like a Vision Pro problem, right? The average consumer will see the Vision Pro and be like, well, why is this thing $3,500 when they have $600 VR glasses? But then you talk to tech nerds like us, and we know the technology and the sensors that they put in it brings that cost up to where $3,500 is a good value for what they're offering in it. That was the problem with this tablet, right? The iPad, for all the technology that they added in it, was really good. They wanted to offer a more premium tablet, and people, the soccer mom was standing in the store was like, "Well, why is this thing $600?" But everybody's talking about this iPad, and this iPad is what was that at the time? $399, $499 for that
yeah,
for
that
that.
surprise price, right?
Yep. So you go, but man, the technology that they packed into this little BlackBerry was awesome. Way more advanced than an iPad. Way more advanced than any other tablet on the market. Because at that time, RCA and Samsung were just throwing out just cheap tablets on every store shelf and every market that they can get it in. They had a $200, $250 cheap trashy tablet, and BlackBerry shot themselves in the foot because people didn't understand why this tablet was so expensive. But man, Greg, we had some. I know you don't remember the name, but you pushed to get us some, and we had a couple. Let me get the name of this thing. That was a
Yeah, I just don't. You know, so while you're looking that up, so what I remember from what I remember from BlackBerry is I was in Orlando for 9/11,
okay,
and unfortunately got stuck, right? And I just remember everybody with their Blackberries and no big deal and had all this stuff, and all I had was a two-way pager. Now remember, I love that two-way pager,
right,
right?
right.
So, but yeah, that's what I remember about Blackberries because, that was the time. That
Yeah,
was the time for them. So,
yeah. So it was called the BlackBerry Playbook, and
okay, the playbook sounds familiar for
yeah,
sure.
and this thing, oh, it had a beautiful screen on it. So of course, all of this stuff is outdated now. But if you think it's about the time, you put yourself at 2011. This thing had a dual core processor in it. In 2011, 1 gigahertz dual core processor. It had 1 gigabyte of RAM. And again, all of this is outdated because we're talking 16 gigabytes now in my tablet now. But 2011, 1 gigabyte of RAM in a tablet was amazing. Nothing to take advantage of this, right? BlackBerry OS just didn't, or tablet OS that they called it at the time, just didn't take advantage of all of this processing power, which is the same issue that we're having now with these M4 processors. But and iPad OS. But man, at the time, this thing was awesome, and just no one could wrap their heads around why should I spend so much for a tablet, and I think that's what hurt it. That's
Yeah,
what hurt it. It had an HDMI output on the device,
yeah,
so you can take this device and plug it into your TV. There was
and
nothing like that for the iPad. There weren't even adapters for that iPad then, right? We didn't get adapters to export video until I want to say that second gen of the Retina iPad, right? The heavy one before the Air, or maybe it was the Air. When the Air was released, we got those adapters to be able to export video.
yeah.
So I mean, I
And
could be wrong, but
what's funny is now we find ways to justify $2,000 for an iPad.
yeah,
Forget that.
yeah. Yeah, so I think that's what it was. But anyway, back to the whole, alternative scenario. I think BlackBerry would still be a leader, right? They still would be that dominant force in the mobile market, and we would have still be, clacking away on those little keyboard, those little mini keyboards and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, really cool. Um, the last thing too, I would think of is I would tell you, what started my love for mobile devices and just technology period was my little pocket PC that I had. I took the time management with Pocket PC class, and they gave us the Pocket PC. We got to keep them after the class, and managing my calendar and managing my contacts and all of that was cool with the little stylus. And I figured out the little hacks to be able to play movies and music videos and stuff on it. And at the time was really cool. And had we would have had to stick with that, you know, that type of device, just thinking about the normal progression, right, as that device advances and upgrade throughout the years, it probably would be at the point to where, had Apple not forced the hand or pushed it, it would probably be at the point of an advanced, what is it, the iPod Touch that we had, the little slim iPod Touch. It would probably be, as advanced as that is at some point in history. So I can see myself using Pocket PC and Windows CE and those mobile operating systems like that.
Yeah, I remember those devices, and I have a particular fondness for Palm.
Yeah.
Trios, Palm 5s. We had a developer that was working with us when I was in the call center at the bank. We had a developer working with us, and at one point, instead of giving him a bonus because he did an amazing job,
Hmm.
we bought him a Palm 5. And it was something he would have never bought for himself. He was a family man, right? You know how it goes. Never
Right.
would have bought it for himself, and got that for him, and he used it for years and even when they had way, way, way better versions. I think it was still a black and white version, and they came out with color, and he still just used that thing forever. So I'm definitely nostalgic for those, and anyway, I love those. That was cool. So yeah.
Yeah. Didn't Palm end up getting purchased by BlackBerry, right?
Yeah.
And they never did anything with it.
Nope.
Never did it. It was exciting at the time because we were like, oh man, BlackBerry bought Palm, and now we're about to get some really awesome features on the phones, and it just things just kind of shifted towards Android and iOS.
Yeah.
So what about you, Greg? What do you got?
So, we've talked through a few of them, but let me just throw out a few others. If I think about, other than the fact that I have to use Windows, I think the Surface devices um, would probably be where I would go from a computing standpoint. At one
Yeah,
point it was said that Mac OS was going to die out. And if Mac OS had died out and iPad OS didn't pick up where it left off, then what are you left with? Right.
right.
And so I think Surface might have been a better combination of things. Um, you know, probably would be MacBook and iPad in one, because they really don't have two
Yeah,
devices like that. They're designed to be all in ones, but that's probably where I would end up kicking and screaming, because you have to deal with Windows. For my client right now, I'm doing some observation stuff, and they're all on Windows, and I'm looking at them, how they have to navigate Windows to pull up, to switch applications and screens and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't miss that
yeah,
at all. So
yeah. Yeah, I forgot about those. That's a good mention because I actually have that first generation Surface, and I still keep up with the Surface. I see they released some earlier this year, and they're always nice devices, the laptop and the tablets.
yeah.
So I remember when they finally went large and got the 13-inch one, and I was so curious about that and kind of leaning towards it, and it's like, I just don't want to deal with Windows. Just don't. I just want a mobile OS. I don't want a full blown version of Windows. But yeah, you're right too. I do. I love those Surface devices.
I would most definitely have a Kindle for reading, right? It actually would be interesting to see where ebooks would have gone without iPads. Now wouldn't have all the apps that I have, which would be unfortunate, but I would definitely have a Kindle that would be my reading device. And then the one thing I started to think about and went, no, I don't even want to think about this because it's my favorite, right? Is I don't even want to think about what would be the Apple Watch alternative, because everything else out there is
Right.
just garbage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. They'll just be Fitbits, right? We'll
yeah,
have a more advanced Fitbit that probably tracked a few more things, a few more health things. But yeah, that's why I say this question was so hard because you know even though companies innovated and Apple they aren't doing certain things or certain features, they still force the hands of these other companies, right?
right.
They still push these companies in the directions to innovate and stuff and to pull people in. So yeah, if even though we had Fitbits, they still would just be that little basic device unless Apple came out with the Apple Watch and forced Google to make the Google Band
Yeah.
and the Android or Android Band or whatever they call it, and for this the Fitbit to create their smartwatch version of the Fitbit.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I hadn't worn a watch for years until I got the Apple Watch.
yeah. Same here.
So yeah. Anyway.
Same here.
And then, the last thing I just kind of wanted to mention is I would probably be fiddling around with things like the OnePlus folding phone. That's gotten super, super good ratings. MKBHD did a review on it and gave it really high things. So I'd be fiddling around with that kind of stuff. And most likely my daily driver would most likely be something like the Google Pixel. Right. Now, the thing is, and this is why you don't travel back in time, because you never know how changes, like Homer Simpson stepping on a butterfly,
Right,
completely changing the
right.
future, right? But I don't know if the Pixel would be where it is today without the
Yeah.
iPhone, right? And so, but just eliminate the iPhone from the mix and assume everything else is the same. I'd be fiddling with all of the One Pluses and that kind of stuff, and I'd probably want a Pixel as my daily driver. I
Yeah.
do not see myself going for Samsung, even though they just announced some new flip phones and folding phones and stuff like that.
Hmm.
They're either boring or just not great. I mean, I hate to do this, but you're talking about the company whose early folding phones had that plastic crease down the middle of the front, right? That you couldn't
Yep.
get rid of. And then you're also talking about the company that at one point, for months, every time you got on an airplane, they said, if you have Samsung X, Y, and Z phones, you have to get off the plane.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, right?
Yep.
I don't think it was that extreme. I think it was more you couldn't put them. No, actually, I think they didn't allow them even in the cabin, and you definitely couldn't put them in the baggage stuff. So, I mean, they got past that.
Yeah.
That could have ended the company, but it didn't. But I mean, this is just, yeah, no. So I don't see
Yeah.
myself. I've played with the Samsungs. I've played with the Pixels. The Pixels are just way, way, way better
Yeah.
devices.
Yeah.
So,
Any company that makes a device that'll burn your house down could could definitely potentially ruin that company. You know what I mean? And I'm glad, because not I know there's Apple haters and they they want to see the company go out of business, and there's Samsung haters and they want to see. I'm not like that. I don't want to see any company fail. Um, Also, too, being on the other side of companies getting purchased and swallowed up and just becoming an afterthought to a bigger company. I'm not into that either. Seeing companies fail to where they have to be purchased or assimilated and absorbed into another company. I like to see companies do because we're talking about millions of jobs for millions of people. So when all of that was going on, I was really hoping that they got those phones, they did whatever recall, and they got that whole battery issue resolved because it wasn't just bad for Samsung, but it was bad for all mobile phone manufacturers, right? Because every time your iPhone heat up, they will remind you, oh, remember when the battery problems with the Samsung phones? Are we
yeah.
looking at that? And they call everything a gate. Watergate happened back when Nixon was in office, but everything is a gate now. There's microphone gate and there's battery gate
Antenna
and there's
gate, you're holding it wrong.
antenna
And
gate and yeah
yeah,
yeah. So everything they're looking for a controversy and all of that just breaks people's trust in mobile devices and technology, and that's what we were working against. Remember,
yeah.
in our days, we had to argue with people to get them to even pick up the phone, and if they can just reference, well, what about this? This is saying that I won't be able to get reception if I'm, at the airport or something, and I got to talk to my clients. That just made our jobs harder. So
Yeah.
we never rooted for other companies to fail,
No.
and I'm
And
glad Samsung moved past that.
here's the reality. I mean, we said take Apple out of the picture. We don't know if Google or Samsung would have pushed things forward as much. But take one of those other competitors out of the picture, and who knows if Apple would have
Right.
pushed things forward as much too. So you
Yeah.
need to have competition. You need to have companies doing innovative things. And I know a lot of people will say, well, all Apple does is take something somebody else did and put it in practice. Honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm okay
Yeah.
with Apple taking whatever's been done, learning from it, and doing it the Apple way.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
anyway. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you on that. Competition is definitely a good
yep.
thing.
Hey, Jay, before we go, so I don't know if I said this on air or not, but while we were talking about this, I did get my cameras back into
Okay.
HomeKit. So, took a little
T-
bit. So, had
was
to,
it a restart or how did you do it?
no, well, I had to, because they fell off. I did some, I was going to mention this to you. I had to reboot my fridge, and it's not a smart fridge. So,
Okay.
the way these RV fridges work, they've got something that says, hey, if you see low voltage on the batteries, because they draw off of the 12-volt batteries, shut off to not damage the compressor.
Right.
So I was having this issue where my the compressor would wind down and then 10 seconds later wind back up and then wind down and wind back up, and it would do it 2 or 3 times, but there wasn't the big click that normally you get in the fridge that says turn on or turn off.
Right.
So I was reading, and they said some other people were having other problems with this fridge, and so they said, yeah, you got to reset it. So I had to disconnect the shore power, disconnect the batteries, and I had to do it. I had to cover the solar panels so it couldn't get any solar power because
Hmm.
it runs off of the solar panel. and leave it off for 10 or 15 minutes so that it would reset and it would no longer think that it was still under this warning about low voltage. And it seems to have fixed it. I haven't noticed it doing that anymore. But anyway, when I did that, I did that on a Saturday evening, and Sunday or Friday evening, and then Saturday we were headed out to do something, and I realized none of the cameras were online and they wouldn't sync back up to the base, and so I actually had to remove them from the base and then re-add them, which means I had to redo all the settings. And
Right,
what I
right.
didn't notice, which tells me that I probably don't even need them in HomeKit anymore, I can probably unbind it from HomeKit. I didn't even
Mm-hmm.
realize that they were no longer in HomeKit. So to fix that, you go into the Eufy app. And by the way, you know who the manufacturer of the Eufy stuff is?
Who?
Anchor.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, that's who it says in the app. So anyway,
Okay.
if that's the case, you know, chalk another one up for Anchor.
Yep.
But anyway, you go into the Eufy app, you go into the HomeKit authorization, and sure enough, you look under there, and it's got the base, but then it's got the two cameras, and neither of them were checked. So I had to edit, check both of them, and it did it. They came back up, and I had already set my phone back down, but then I could see it on my iPad. And but the bike camera that's on the other side wasn't coming up with the live feed. So I went back into the Eufy app, took it off again, put it back on. Then I had to redo the settings for the third time
Yeah.
in the HomeKit app and all that kind of stuff. So it looks like I'm back up. And actually, the problem where I wasn't able to see the live feeds sometimes on them so far seems to be better even. So
Okay, good.
I probably
Good.
cleaned up some of the IP address stuff while I was at it. So
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's a good deal. I'm glad that's working. And I know it seems rough starting off too, but I think you'll get to the point because now you only have a couple of devices, but you'll get to a point where you're like, okay, I see what the problem is, why I should be using HomeKit. Because now you're just using a Eufy app and
yeah,
the app for the mobile home uh
right.
put it that one app. But
Yeah,
yeah, when you get to a ton of devices, you're going to be like, okay, I want to just manage this in one place
yeah.
and focus on keeping those devices in HomeKit.
If I
So
get there, remember, Jay, my goal is to have a simple life, not a complex life.
right, right. And one of the things too, that relay I told you, I really resisted putting those on the list just because of all the issues that I have with it.
Yeah,
That those HomeKit relays, while when they work, they're great, but man, when they go off of the network, it's a hassle. But then you can
the
stick them on everything, on
yeah,
anything you want, you know?
yeah. But the Eufy app has been solid, so I have no complaints about the Eufy app, and so
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's good.
and those solar panels, primo. My cameras rarely are below 95%. Most of the time, they're not even charging because I've got all of the
Right.
settings and stuff dialed in now, and they get a couple hours of sun a day is all they really need to get from overnight. They'll drain down to 98%, so it just needs to get it back up to 100%.
Yeah.
So it's like zero maintenance on this stuff. So
Man, that's a win for $30 too. And
yeah,
remember when we originally talked about it, we both were like, and the reviews aren't good on it. Like,
yeah,
it's unnecessary. You could just charge them. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a win. I like that. I like that.
Well, and I had to change the angle on this one that's out here in front because I put my grill, which meant I had to move my storage box up, so it was going to be blocked. The one door
Hmm.
was going to be blocked, so I've actually moved it further to the front of the trailer. It's a better angle now too, so I'm actually got more insights into both of my doors. So
Okay.
anyway,
All right, cool. All right. Well, yeah, I guess we can wrap this thing up. That was all I had. Just to kind of talk, since we were talking about alternatives anyway, I figured
yeah,
this hypothetical alternative
yeah.
future would be cool.
I personally am happy that I live in a universe where Samsung, Google, Huawei, OnePlus, and Apple all exist. Even though I'm all in on Apple, I'm glad
Yeah.
all of the others exist because I want them to keep pushing Apple. So, oh,
Right.
Jay, I got my eye prescription.
Okay. So you gonna you thinking about?
I'm
Did you get new
pondering.
glasses, or you just got a new prescription?
No, I mean it had been a couple years because just my eye doctor moved offices and it was further away, and I just never got there. So But I went in and so I had to get new glasses, which also ridiculously expensive because I'm old and need all the fancy stuff in order to be able to see all the time. But
Right.
I talked to my doc about it, and he actually issued me a prescription specific for that. So, because I have progressive lenses, so they adjust far and close, but he
Yep.
issued me for what should be the right distance. And I said, okay, because I thought about buying this, but I didn't want to buy it unless I knew they could match my prescription. I said, they said they can match 90% of prescriptions. He said, you should be fine. He says, yours is very, very straightforward, even though I've got astigmatism and all that kind of stuff. So he just wrote it for the computer viewing distance
Okay.
is what so he wrote me a specific one for that. So I'm still resisting because it's still ridiculously expensive.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. And you kind of already plan to not having it. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Or not using it, but we'll
Yeah,
see.
and if we're gonna
Well,
buy a
for
new
folks that's
trailer,
listening, we're
if we're
talking
gonna buy a
about
new
the Vision Pro.
yeah, Vision Pro. If we're gonna buy a new trailer in the next 4 months, and if I do decide I want a phone, which I think is still kind of likely, so maybe we'll see if the business over the next several months can set aside enough to
Right. Right.
make the
'Cause-
purchase without
yeah,
hitting the bottom line too much.
because you can pretty much offload maybe 75% of your business to the Vision Pro and do all of
Probably.
your work and
Yep.
stuff in there. So yeah.
Yep.
All right, folks.
All
Well,
right,
thanks for
now we're
tuning
done.
in. Yeah, now we're done. Thanks for tuning in. As usual, we appreciate you guys listening. Don't forget to share this out with anyone that you think can get some value from it. Just hearing two old men ramble on about tech, and join the conversation. Jump in the comment section. Yep, and we appreciate you guys listening. And
Yep.
till next week,
Till next week, or maybe the week after. We'll see.
and maybe the
So,
next. Yep, I keep forgetting about next week. The week
Yep.
after. We're not recording next week. We'll see you the week
Yeah.
after.
All right, later, folks.